Welcome to Sleepless Astronomer, where we explore the wonders of space and the universe. If you're enjoying these cosmic journeys, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. We post new videos every single day, so you can tune in whenever you want to learn about the cosmos. And we'd love to hear from you in the comments. Let us know where in the world you're watching from. We always enjoy connecting with fellow space enthusiasts around the globe. Now let's begin tonight's journey through the universe. How we find planets around other stars. For most of human history, planets were only known to exist in our own solar system. Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn were visible to the naked eye, and with telescopes came the discoveries of Uranus and Neptune. But beyond our solar system, despite billions upon billions of stars filling the galaxy, no one had ever confirmed the existence of even a single planet orbiting another star. The problem wasn't that exoplanets, planets around other stars, didn't exist. The problem was that they're extraordinarily difficult to detect. A planet is tiny compared to its star, produces no light of its own, and sits right next to a brilliant star that outshines it completely. Trying to see a planet next to its star is like trying to spot a firefly hovering next to a searchlight from hundreds of miles away. The first confirmed exoplanet around a sun-like star was discovered in 1995 by Michel Mayor and Didier Queloz, who shared the Nobel Prize in Physics in 2019 for this groundbreaking work. They didn't actually see the planet. Instead, they detected its presence indirectly by observing how it affected its parent star. This indirect approach has proven to be the key to finding exoplanets, and astronomers have developed several clever techniques that reveal planets without ever actually imaging them directly. The method Mayor and Queloz used is called the radial velocity technique, sometimes known as the Doppler wobble method. The basic principle relies on the fact that a planet doesn't simply orbit its star. Rather, both the planet and the star orbit their common center of mass. Imagine two ice skaters holding hands and spinning around. If one skater is much heavier than the other, the heavy skater barely moves, while the light skater whips around in a large circle. But the heavy skater does move slightly, wobbling around their common center as they spin. The same happens with stars and planets. Jupiter, the most massive planet in our solar system, causes the Sun to wobble slightly as both orbit their common center of mass. The Sun's wobble is small. It shifts back and forth by only about 13 meters per second, roughly the speed of a bicycle. But this wobble is detectable. As the star moves toward Earth, its light gets slightly blue shifted, compressed to shorter wavelengths. As it moves away, the light gets red shifted, stretched to longer wavelengths. By measuring these tiny shifts in the star's spectrum with extremely precise instruments, astronomers can detect the wobble and infer that a planet must be causing it. The planet Mayor and Queloz discovered, orbiting a star called 51 Pegasi, created a much larger wobble than Jupiter creates in our Sun, because this planet is both massive and very close to its star. It completes an orbit in just over 4 days, compared to Jupiter's 12-year orbit. The close proximity and short period make the wobble more pronounced and easier to detect. This planet, later named Dimidium, shocked astronomers because it's a gas giant similar to Jupiter, but orbiting closer to its star than Mercury orbits our Sun. Before this discovery, most astronomers assumed that giant planets could only form far from their stars, where temperatures were cold enough for ice to exist. The discovery of hot Jupiters revolutionized our understanding of how planetary systems form and evolve. The radial velocity method works best for finding massive planets close to their stars because these create the largest wobbles. Small planets like Earth create wobbles so tiny that they're difficult to detect even with the best current instruments. A planet similar to Earth orbiting a Sun-like star at Earth's distance would cause a wobble of less than 1 meter per second, slower than walking pace. Detecting such minute velocity changes requires incredibly stable spectrographs and careful corrections for other sources of stellar variability, like star spots and convection in the star's atmosphere. The second major technique for finding exoplanets is the transit method, which has discovered more exoplanets than any other technique. A transit occurs when a planet passes directly in front of its star, as seen from Earth, blocking a tiny fraction of the star's light. For a Jupiter-sized planet transiting a Sun-like star, the star's brightness drops by about 1%. A small change, but definitely measurable with precise photometry. For an Earth-sized planet, the drop is much smaller, only about 1/100%, but still detectable with sufficiently sensitive instruments. The Kepler Space Telescope, launched by NASA in 2009, was specifically designed to detect transits. Kepler monitored the brightness of more than 150,000 stars continuously for over 4 years, searching for the telltale dips in brightness that indicates a planet passing in front of its star. The mission was spectacularly successful, discovering thousands of exoplanets and showing that planets are common. Most stars have at least one planet, and many have multiple planets. Transit observations provide information that radial velocity measurements cannot. The depth of the transit, how much the star's brightness decreases, reveals the planet's size. A bigger planet blocks more light, creating a deeper transit. The duration of the transit reveals information about the planet's orbital distance and the star's size. By combining transit observations with radial velocity measurements, astronomers can determine both the planet's size and its mass, which allows them to calculate its density and infer what it might be made of. A low-density planet is probably a gas giant like Jupiter. A high-density planet is likely rocky like Earth. A medium density might indicate a water world or a planet with a thick atmosphere. The transit method has limitations. It only works for planets whose orbits happen to be aligned edge-on from Earth's perspective. If a planetary system is tilted so that planets pass above or below the star rather than directly in front of it, no transits occur, and the planets remain undetectable by this method. Statistically, only a small fraction of planets are oriented correctly for transits to be visible from Earth. For a planet at Earth's distance from a Sun-like star, the probability of correct alignment is less than 1%. Despite this limitation, Kepler's strategy of monitoring thousands of stars simultaneously meant that even with low individual probabilities, many planets were discovered. Direct imaging represents the most straightforward approach, actually taking a picture of the planet next to its star, but it's also the most technically challenging. The problem is the enormous brightness difference. A Sun-like star is typically 10 billion times brighter than a Jupiter-like planet at visible wavelengths, and the planet sits right next to the star in the sky. Special techniques are required to block the star's light and reveal the faint planet. Coronagraphs, which create an artificial eclipse by placing a mask over the star, and star shades, which fly separately from the telescope and block the star's light before it enters the telescope, both enable direct imaging. Direct imaging works best for young, massive planets that are far from their stars. Young planets are still hot from their formation, glowing brightly in infrared light, making the contrast ratio more favorable. Planets farther from their stars are more separated in angle, making them easier to distinguish from the star's glare. Several dozen planets have been directly imaged, mostly young gas giants orbiting at large distances from their stars. These planets appear as faint dots of light in images taken with large, ground-based telescopes equipped with adaptive optics systems that correct for atmospheric blurring. Gravitational microlensing provides another method for detecting exoplanets, particularly useful for finding planets at large distances from Earth and planets far from their host stars. The technique relies on general relativity. When one star passes almost directly in front of a more distant background star from Earth's perspective. The foreground star's gravity acts as a lens, bending and focusing the background star's light. This creates a temporary brightening lasting days to weeks. If the foreground star has a planet, the planet's gravity creates an additional, brief spike in brightness, revealing its presence. Microlensing events are rare and unpredictable. You can't choose to observe a particular star and wait for a microlensing event. Instead, astronomers monitor millions of stars in dense stellar regions, like the galactic bulge, waiting for events to occur. When an event happens, it's unique. The same foreground and background star will never align again in human timescales. This makes follow-up observations challenging, but the method has discovered several dozen planets and is particularly good at finding planets in the outer reaches of planetary systems where other methods struggle. Astrometry measures the precise position of a star in the sky over time. If a planet is present, the star wobbles back and forth on the sky, shifting position slightly as both star and planet orbit their common center of mass. This is similar to the radial velocity method, but measures the wobble in position rather than in velocity. The wobble is extremely small. For Jupiter orbiting the Sun, as seen from a distance of 10 light-years, the wobble would be about half a millisecond, roughly equivalent to measuring the width of a human hair from a distance of 200 miles. The European Space Agency's Gaia mission, launched in 2013, is measuring the positions of over 1 billion stars with unprecedented precision, and it's beginning to detect the astrometric wobbles caused by giant planets. As Gaia continues its mission and accumulates more data, it will discover planets through astrometry and provide three-dimensional orbital information for many planets discovered by other methods. Each detection method has biases. It favors finding certain types of planets over others. Radial velocity finds massive planets close to their stars. Transits find planets of all masses, but only those aligned edge-on. Direct imaging finds young massive planets far from their stars. Microlensing finds planets at all distances but works best for planets far from their stars. By using multiple methods, astronomers build a more complete picture of the diversity of planetary systems. The combination of techniques has revealed that planetary systems come in astonishing variety. Hot Jupiters orbit closer to their stars than Mercury. Super-Earths, planets larger than Earth but smaller than Neptune, appear to be extremely common, yet don't exist in our solar system. Some systems have planets in extremely compact orbits, with multiple planets packed closer to their star than Mercury is to our Sun. Other systems have planets on highly eccentric orbits, stretching from close in to far out in elongated ellipses. Some planets orbit binary stars, experiencing sunsets with two suns like Luke Skywalker's home planet Tatooine in Star Wars. The atmospheres of exoplanets can be studied through transit spectroscopy. When a planet transits its star, some starlight filters through the planet's atmosphere on its way to Earth. Different molecules in the atmosphere absorb light at specific wavelengths, creating an absorption spectrum that reveals the atmospheric composition. Astronomers have detected water vapor, methane, carbon dioxide, and other molecules in exoplanet atmospheres. The James Webb Space Telescope, launched in 2021, is revolutionizing this field with its ability to detect even fainter spectral signatures and characterize the atmospheres of smaller, potentially habitable planets. The search for Earth-like planets in habitable zones, the region around a star where temperatures allow liquid water to exist on a planet's surface, drives much exoplanet research. Kepler discovered several candidates, including Kepler 452b, a planet slightly larger than Earth orbiting a Sun-like star at a distance where temperatures might support liquid water. Whether any of these planets actually harbour life remains unknown, but the discovery that Earth-sized planets in habitable zones exist at all is profound. We're no longer wondering whether such planets exist, but rather whether any of them host life. Future missions will improve our ability to find and characterize Earth-like planets. The Nancy Grace Roman Space Telescope will use microlensing and direct imaging to find planets. Ground-based extremely large telescopes currently under construction will directly image planets and study their atmospheres in detail. Proposed missions like the Habitable Worlds Observatory aim to directly image dozens of Earth-like planets and search their atmospheres for biosignatures, gases like oxygen and methane that might indicate the presence of life. In less than 3 decades, exoplanet science has progressed from the first tentative discovery to finding thousands of planets, characterizing their properties, studying their atmospheres, and identifying candidates that might harbor life. The methods astronomers developed to overcome the challenge of finding tiny, faint planets next to brilliant stars have succeeded beyond initial expectations, revealing that planets are not rare accidents but common outcomes of star formation. That our solar system is just one example among billions of planetary systems filling the galaxy, and that the question of whether we're alone in the universe might finally be answerable through observations of the atmospheres of distant worlds orbiting alien suns. How evolution would work on other worlds. Evolution is not a theory specific to Earth. It is a fundamental principle that must operate wherever life exists, as inevitable as gravity or thermodynamics. The basic mechanism is elegantly simple. Organisms that are better suited to their environment tend to survive and reproduce more successfully than those less well suited, passing their advantageous traits to offspring. Over countless generations, this process of natural selection shapes organisms to fit their environments with remarkable precision. Charles Darwin recognized this principle in the 19th century by studying finches on the Galapagos Islands and countless other organisms, but the principle extends far beyond Earth. On any world where life emerges, evolution would be the engine driving biological diversity and adaptation, though the specific outcomes would be shaped by each world's unique conditions. The fundamental requirements for evolution are remarkably minimal. Life must be able to reproduce, creating offspring. There must be variation among individuals. No 2 organisms are exactly alike. Some of this variation must be heritable, passed from parents to offspring, and there must be differential survival and reproduction. Some variants survive and reproduce more successfully than others. These conditions create evolution automatically, inevitably, as surely as releasing a ball on a slope causes it to roll downhill. Any replicating system with heritable variation and selection will evolve, whether it's based on DNA, some other information storage molecule, or even non-biological replicating systems. On Earth, DNA serves as the information storage medium for nearly all life. The DNA molecule consists of 2 strands wrapped around each other in a double helix, with each strand composed of a sugar phosphate backbone and a sequence of 4 bases: adenine, thymine, guanine, and cytosine. The sequence of these bases encodes genetic information, and this information is copied when cells divide, passed to offspring when organisms reproduce. Mutations, random changes in the DNA sequence caused by copying errors, radiation, chemical damage, or other factors, create the variation upon which natural selection acts. But DNA is not the only possible genetic molecule. Scientists have created synthetic alternatives called XNAs, xenonucleic acids, that can store information and be copied, yet use different sugars or even different backbone structures than natural DNA and RNA. These artificial genetic molecules demonstrate that information storage and heredity don't require DNA specifically. An alien organism might use a completely different molecule to store genetic information, perhaps based on different chemistry more suited to its world's conditions. A very cold world might favor genetic molecules that are stable and flexible at low temperatures. A very hot world might favor molecules that resist heat degradation. The specific molecule doesn't matter. What matters is that it can store information, be copied with reasonable but imperfect fidelity, and allow variation to arise. The timescales of evolution would differ dramatically on different worlds. On Earth, bacterial generations might span minutes to hours, allowing rapid evolution. The bacteria that cause diseases evolve antibiotic resistance within years or decades as antibiotics create selection pressure, favoring resistant strains. In contrast, large organisms with long generation times evolve more slowly. Elephants with generation times of decades evolve far more slowly than bacteria. On an alien world where organisms have extremely long lifespans, perhaps living for thousands of years, evolution would proceed at a glacial pace from a human perspective, with significant changes taking millions or billions of years. Conversely, on a world where organisms reproduce very rapidly, evolution might proceed at dizzying speeds. If alien microorganisms reproduced every few minutes, like some Earth bacteria, they could evolve through thousands of generations while we watched. Such organisms might adapt to new conditions, almost in real time, developing resistance to threats or exploiting new resources faster than slower evolving species could respond. The environment determines what traits are advantageous. On Earth, giraffes evolved long necks because reaching high branches provided access to food that shorter animals couldn't exploit. Cheetahs evolved extreme speed to catch fast prey. Cacti evolved to store water and reduce surface area in desert environments. Each adaptation reflects the specific challenges and opportunities of the organism's environment. On alien worlds, different environments would favor different adaptations. On a high-gravity planet, evolution would favor short, stocky body plans with strong skeletons and powerful muscles to support body weight against stronger gravitational pull. Tall, slender organisms would be at a disadvantage because the structural demands of supporting height would be too great. Flying organisms might be rare or absent because overcoming gravity to achieve flight would require enormous energy expenditure. Over millions of generations, organisms would become increasingly adapted to moving efficiently under high gravity, perhaps developing 4 legs or even 6 or 8 for stability, with low centers of gravity and massive muscular systems. On a low-gravity world, the opposite pressures would apply. Organisms could afford to be tall and slender because less structural support is needed. Flight might be easy, favoring the evolution of wings and aerial lifestyles. Animals might leap enormous distances because the energy required to overcome gravity would be minimal. Over time, organisms might evolve increasingly delicate structures, abandoning the heavy skeletons and dense muscles necessary on higher gravity worlds in favor of lighter, more energy-efficient body plans. Atmospheric composition would profoundly influence evolution. On Earth, the transition from an oxygen-poor to an oxygen-rich atmosphere about 2.5 billion years ago, the Great Oxidation Event, was catastrophic for organisms adapted to the old atmosphere. Oxygen was toxic to them, and they retreated to oxygen-free refuges or went extinct. But for organisms that could tolerate or use oxygen, this chemical change created opportunities. Oxygen metabolism releases far more energy than anaerobic metabolism, enabling the evolution of larger, more active, more complex organisms. The size of organisms on Earth is ultimately limited by how efficiently they can deliver oxygen to their cells. On a world that never develops an oxygen-rich atmosphere, organisms might remain permanently small and metabolically limited. Without the high energy yield of oxygen metabolism, active lifestyles like those of birds, mammals, or even fish might be impossible. Life might consist entirely of small, slowly moving organisms eking out existence on the limited energy available from anaerobic metabolism. Or evolution might discover entirely different high-energy metabolic pathways based on different oxidizing agents, perhaps sulfur compounds, chlorine, or substances we haven't considered. The availability of water determines many evolutionary paths. On Earth, life originated in water, and even terrestrial organisms remain fundamentally aquatic. Our cells are filled with water, and we constantly need to replenish water lost to evaporation and excretion. On a water-rich world with extensive oceans, evolution might produce countless aquatic species, but might never develop terrestrial life if there's no advantage to leaving water. On a dry world with limited water, evolution would favour organisms that conserve water ruthlessly, perhaps evolving impermeable skins, efficient kidneys, metabolic water production, or even the ability to extract water from food or from humidity in air. Predation creates powerful selection pressures that drive evolutionary arms races. Prey evolve defences, armour, toxins, speed, camouflage, while predators evolve counter-adaptations to overcome those defences. Stronger jaws, detoxification mechanisms, greater speed, better sensory systems. This coevolution produces increasingly sophisticated organisms on both sides. On Earth, the evolution of predators coincides with the evolution of many complex features: eyes to detect prey, brains to process sensory information, and coordinate hunting strategies, complex behaviours for stalking and capturing prey. On alien worlds, predation would likely emerge wherever life becomes sufficiently complex, driving similar evolutionary arms races, but the specific adaptations would reflect the alien environment. On a world with dense fog or darkness, evolution might favour chemical or acoustic sensing over vision. On a world with three-dimensional environments, like open water or thick forests, predators might evolve better spatial perception and three-dimensional manoeuvrability. On a world where prey can burrow or fly, predators would evolve means to follow them into those refuges. Sexual selection, where organisms choose mates based on specific traits, creates another evolutionary force. On Earth, peacocks evolved elaborate tails, not because those tails help survival, but because peahens prefer males with impressive tails. This sexual selection can drive the evolution of traits that actually reduce survival, but increase reproductive success. On alien worlds, whatever traits the choosing sex prefers would be amplified through generations, potentially creating wildly extravagant features that serve no purpose beyond attracting mates. Convergent evolution, where unrelated organisms independently evolve similar solutions to similar problems, demonstrates that certain designs work well for certain challenges. Eyes evolved independently many times on Earth because detecting light provides such valuable information that natural selection repeatedly favoured organisms with improved light-sensing abilities. Wings evolved independently in insects, birds, bats, and pterosaurs because flight provides such significant advantages that multiple lineages evolved aerial capabilities. On alien worlds, convergent evolution would operate similarly. Any organism that needs to move quickly through water would likely evolve a streamlined body shape, because physics dictates that this shape minimizes drag. Any organism that needs to see would likely evolve some structure that focuses light onto photosensitive cells, though the specific implementation might differ. Any organism that needs to manipulate objects would likely evolve some form of grasping appendages. The specific details would vary. Alien hands might have 3 fingers or 7, might be at the end of tentacles or rigid arms, might use suction or hooks instead of friction, but the basic function of grasping would emerge wherever it provides advantage. However, historical contingency, the accidents of evolutionary history, also plays a crucial role. Vertebrates on Earth have 4 limbs because that's what the early fish that first crawled onto land happened to have. There's nothing inevitable about the number 4. If a 6-limbed fish had been the first successful land colonizer, terrestrial vertebrates might all have 6 limbs today. On alien worlds, similar historical accidents would lock in features that become constraints on all future evolution. an early successful body plan, might dominate an entire planet's evolutionary tree, with all descendants constrained by that ancestral architecture. Mass extinctions reset evolutionary trajectories. On Earth, the asteroid impact 66 million years ago that killed the non-avian dinosaurs allowed mammals, previously small nocturnal creatures, to diversify into the enormous variety we see today. Without that extinction, mammals might have remained small and marginal while dinosaurs continued dominating. On alien worlds, whatever catastrophes occur, asteroid impacts, volcanic eruptions, climate changes, nearby supernova, would similarly reset evolution, wiping out dominant groups and allowing previously marginal organisms to radiate into newly available ecological roles. The speed of environmental change influences evolutionary dynamics. Rapidly changing environments favour organisms with short generation times and high mutation rates that can adapt quickly. Stable environments favour organisms optimised for efficiency in unchanging conditions. An alien world with a highly variable climate, perhaps due to an eccentric orbit or an unstable star, would see evolution favouring adaptable generalists. A world with stable conditions for billions of years might produce highly specialised organisms, exquisitely adapted to narrow niches, but unable to cope with change. Intelligence itself is an evolutionary adaptation that emerged on Earth because it provided survival and reproductive advantages. Brains require enormous energy. Human brains consume about 20% of our total energy, despite being only 2% of body mass. This high cost means intelligence only evolves when its benefits outweigh its costs. On Earth, intelligence apparently provided sufficient advantage through tool use, social cooperation, and problem solving to justify the expense. On alien worlds, whether intelligence evolves depends on whether similar advantages exist. Some environments might favour intelligence more strongly than Earth did. A highly variable environment where adaptability is crucial might select strongly for intelligence and behavioural flexibility. A world where organisms compete primarily through social manipulation rather than physical prowess might favour intelligence. Conversely, some worlds might never produce intelligence because simpler solutions always work well enough. If food is always abundant and predators are absent, the energy costs of maintaining a large brain might never be justified. How evolution would work on other worlds follows the same fundamental principles that operate on Earth: variation, heredity, and selection, but expresses those principles through the unique circumstances of each world. A high-gravity planet would sculpt short, powerful organisms. A dark world might favour chemical sensing over vision. A frigid world might produce organisms with anti-freeze biochemistry and slow metabolisms. Each world would develop its own evolutionary history, branching from simple origins into complexity through billions of years of selection, extinction, radiation, and adaptation, creating ecosystems and organisms as unique as fingerprints, yet fundamentally related through the universal principles of evolution that must operate wherever life exists, proving that while life-specific forms might be infinitely varied across the cosmos, the process that shapes life, evolution through natural selection, remains constant, an inevitable consequence of imperfect replication and limited resources operating across deep time on any world that hosts living things. How extraterrestrial plants could photosynthesize. Photosynthesis, the process by which plants, algae, and certain bacteria capture light energy and convert it into chemical energy, powers most of Earth's ecosystems. Green plants absorb sunlight, split water molecules, combine carbon dioxide from the air with hydrogen from the water, and produce sugars while releasing oxygen as a byproduct. This process transformed Earth's atmosphere from oxygen-poor to oxygen-rich over billions of years, enabling the evolution of complex animal life. Photosynthesis seems so central to life that we naturally wonder whether alien plants on distant worlds would photosynthesize in similar ways. The answer is nuanced. While capturing energy from starlight would likely be advantageous for life on any illuminated world, the specific chemistry and mechanisms of alien photosynthesis would differ dramatically depending on the star's properties, atmospheric composition, available pigments, and evolutionary history of each world. On Earth, photosynthesis centers on chlorophyll, a complex molecule containing magnesium at its center, surrounded by a ring structure that absorbs light strongly in the red and blue portions of the spectrum while reflecting green light, which is why plants appear green. Chlorophyll's absorption spectrum is not random but reflects the properties of sunlight. Our Sun is a yellow dwarf star with a surface temperature around 6,000 degrees Celsius, emitting light most strongly in the visible portion of the spectrum that our eyes evolved to see, with peak emission in the green-yellow range. Plants evolved pigments that absorb the abundant wavelengths while reflecting the less useful portions. But most stars in the galaxy are red dwarfs, cooler, smaller stars with surface temperatures around 3,000 degrees that emit most of their light in the red and infrared portions of the spectrum. A planet orbiting in the habitable zone of a red dwarf would receive much less visible light and far more infrared radiation than Earth receives from our Sun. Photosynthetic organisms on such a world would need to adapt to this shifted spectrum, likely evolving pigments that absorb infrared light rather than visible light. Capturing infrared photons presents challenges because each infrared photon carries less energy than a visible light photon. On Earth, chlorophyll uses 2 photons, absorbed at different stages of photosynthesis, to extract enough energy to split water molecules, which requires significant energy input. With lower energy infrared photons, alien photosynthesis might need to capture 3 or even 4 photons per reaction to gather sufficient energy, making the process less efficient. However, red dwarf stars are extremely common and extremely long-lived, shining for trillions of years compared to the Sun's 10 billion year lifespan. So even if photosynthesis is less efficient under red dwarf light, organisms would have enormous amounts of time to evolve and adapt. The pigments that absorb infrared light would likely appear black or very dark to human eyes because they would absorb nearly all visible light in addition to infrared. A forest on a red dwarf planet might be covered in black vegetation, maximizing absorption of every available photon from the dim red star. This is the opposite of Earth's green plants, which reject green light as insufficiently useful. On a planet where photons are precious, wasting any light would be disadvantageous, so evolution would favor organisms that capture everything. Conversely, planets orbiting hot, bright blue or white stars would receive intense ultraviolet radiation, along with visible and infrared light. Ultraviolet photons carry high energy, potentially too much energy, as UV light damages DNA and proteins. Photosynthetic organisms on such worlds might evolve pigments that specifically avoid ultraviolet absorption, reflecting or dissipating UV light while capturing only visible wavelengths. Or they might evolve protective mechanisms, UV-absorbing compounds in outer cell layers, extremely efficient DNA repair systems, or pigments that can safely handle high-energy photons by converting excess energy into heat or fluorescence. The color of alien plants would thus depend on their star's spectrum. Under orange K-type stars, plants might be red or orange, reflecting the most common light while absorbing other wavelengths. Under blue stars, plants might be yellow or orange. The specific colors would depend not just on what light is available, but also on what pigments evolution happens to discover and what combination of wavelengths provides optimal energy capture. Multiple pigments working together might be advantageous. On Earth, plants contain several pigments beyond chlorophyll, carotenoids that absorb blue and green light, appearing yellow, orange, or red, and other accessory pigments that expand the range of useful wavelengths. These accessory pigments capture light that chlorophyll misses and transfer the energy to chlorophyll for use in photosynthesis. Alien plants might evolve even more diverse pigment systems, with perhaps 5 or 10 different pigments, each specialized for different wavelength ranges, collectively capturing a broader spectrum than Earth's photosynthetic organisms manage. The electron transport chains that actually convert light energy into chemical energy might use different chemistry than Earth's photosynthesis. On Earth, photosynthesis splits water molecules to extract electrons, releasing oxygen gas as waste. But water splitting is energetically demanding. It requires significant light energy input. An alien photosynthesis might use different electron donors that are easier to oxidize than water. Hydrogen sulfide, for instance, is easier to split than water and was likely used by early photosynthetic bacteria on Earth before oxygen-producing photosynthesis evolved. A planet with abundant hydrogen sulfide might develop photosynthetic life that remains at this stage indefinitely, producing elemental sulfur rather than oxygen as waste. Ion compounds, organic molecules, or even molecular hydrogen could serve as electron donors in alternative photosynthetic pathways. Each would produce different waste products. Ion photosynthesis might precipitate iron oxides. Organic-based photosynthesis might produce various carbon compounds, and hydrogen-based photosynthesis might produce protons that combine with other elements. None of these would generate an oxygen-rich atmosphere, demonstrating that photosynthesis doesn't necessarily equal oxygen production. The carbon source might also vary. Earth plants use carbon dioxide from the atmosphere as their carbon source, but CO2 concentrations vary dramatically across different worlds. Venus has a thick CO2 atmosphere, but is far too hot for life as we know it. Mars has thin atmosphere that's mostly CO2, but overall, CO2 availability is low due to the low pressure. A planet with very low atmospheric CO2 might require photosynthetic organisms that can concentrate and capture CO2 extremely efficiently, perhaps with specialized structures or enzymes far more effective than Earth's plants possess. Alternatively, alien photosynthesis might use carbon sources other than CO2. Carbon monoxide, methane, or even dissolved bicarbonate in water could provide carbon for building organic molecules. Each source would require different enzymatic machinery and would produce different end products. Methane-based photosynthesis might produce more complex hydrocarbons, essentially reversing the process that creates methane on Earth. ICO-based photosynthesis might build organic molecules through different chemical pathways than CO2-based photosynthesis uses. The physical structure of alien photosynthetic organisms might differ radically from Earth's plants. Trees evolved on land where structural support is needed to compete for sunlight, growing tall to shade competitors. But on a planet with perpetual dense cloud cover, blocking direct sunlight and providing only diffuse illumination, there would be no advantage to height. All locations would receive similar light levels. Plants might remain low-growing, perhaps forming dense mats rather than tall structures. On a planet with a very thin atmosphere, providing minimal structural support, perhaps Mars if it ever hosts photosynthetic life, organisms might need to be extremely sturdy and low-profile to withstand wind without atmospheric cushioning. Or on a high-gravity world, the structural challenges of growing tall might be prohibitive, keeping photosynthetic organisms close to the ground in spreading horizontal forms rather than vertical trees. Aquatic photosynthesis might dominate on ocean worlds. Earth's oceans contain vast amounts of photosynthetic organisms, phytoplankton, algae, and photosynthetic bacteria that drift or swim in the water column, capturing sunlight in the upper illuminated layers. On a world covered entirely by ocean, With no dry land, all photosynthesis would necessarily be aquatic. These organisms might evolve greater efficiency at capturing dim light filtered through water, or might develop gas-filled structures to regulate their depth, staying in the optimal light zone. Deep-sea photosynthesis might even be possible using not sunlight, but the faint light produced by hydrothermal vents or bioluminescence. On Earth, some photosynthetic bacteria near deep-sea vents use the faint thermal radiation from the hot vent fluids. This produces very little energy, but it demonstrates that photosynthesis isn't absolutely dependent on sunlight. An alien world with extensive hydrothermal activity might develop photosynthetic life that uses volcanic light, living in eternal darkness sustained by geothermal rather than solar energy. Bioluminescence-powered photosynthesis could create bizarre ecological cycles where organisms generate light through chemical reactions, other organisms use that light for photosynthesis, and the products of photosynthesis support the light-generating organisms. This would be less efficient than using a star's light directly. But on a rogue planet drifting through interstellar space with no star, such a system might be the only way photosynthesis could exist at all. The efficiency of photosynthesis varies greatly on Earth, with most plants converting only 1 to 2% of incoming light energy into chemical energy stored in sugars. This low efficiency reflects various constraints and trade-offs in the photosynthetic machinery. Alien photosynthesis might achieve higher efficiency through different molecular mechanisms, different pigment arrangements, or different metabolic pathways. Alternatively, on worlds where light is extremely dim, even 1 or 2% efficiency might be insufficient, driving evolution toward photosynthetic systems that capture and convert light more effectively, perhaps achieving 5 or 10% efficiency through molecular innovations not present on Earth. Timescales of photosynthesis might differ on other worlds. Earth's photosynthesis operates on timescales of milliseconds to seconds for individual reactions, constrained by the speed of enzyme reactions at Earth's temperatures. On a very cold world, reaction rates would be much slower. Photosynthesis might take minutes or hours for reactions that complete in seconds on Earth. This would mean slower growth rates and organisms that live life in slow motion from our perspective. On a hot world, reactions might proceed faster, allowing rapid photosynthesis and potentially faster growth, though this would also require dealing with the instability of biological molecules at high temperatures. The evolution of photosynthesis on Earth took hundreds of millions of years, with simpler forms appearing first and the complex, oxygen-producing photosynthesis we see in plants evolving later. On alien worlds, the evolutionary trajectory might differ. Perhaps photosynthesis evolves quickly, becoming established within the first billion years of life's appearance. Or perhaps it never evolves at all, with life remaining dependent on chemical energy from geological processes rather than light energy. Photosynthesis, while extremely useful, is not inevitable. It requires specific evolutionary innovations, including light-sensitive pigments, electron transport machinery, and carbon-fixing enzymes. A planet might have abundant life that never discovers photosynthesis, remaining microbial and chemosynthetic indefinitely. The seasonal variations on alien worlds would influence photosynthetic strategies. A planet with extreme axial tilt might experience dramatic seasonal variations in light availability, requiring photosynthetic organisms to either hibernate during dark seasons, store energy during bright seasons, or maintain alternative metabolic modes that don't require light. A tidally locked planet with one side permanently facing its star would have a permanent light side and permanent dark side, with photosynthesis possible only on the lit hemisphere or in the twilight zone between light and dark. The atmospheric chemistry would affect what wavelengths reach the surface. Earth's ozone layer absorbs harmful ultraviolet light, preventing it from reaching the surface. A planet without an ozone layer would expose surface organisms to intense UV, requiring either UV protective mechanisms or restriction of photosynthetic life to water, which naturally blocks UV. A planet with a different atmospheric composition, perhaps with sulfur compounds, nitrogen oxides, or exotic hazes, would filter light differently, creating different wavelengths available at the surface, and thus different optimal pigments for photosynthesis. How extraterrestrial plants could photosynthesize encompasses a vast range of possibilities shaped by stellar spectra, atmospheric filtering, available chemistry, and evolutionary contingency. From black plants absorbing every photon under dim red suns to colourful organisms reflecting abundant high-energy light under bright blue stars. From water-splitting oxygen producers to hydrogen sulfide users releasing sulfur. From rapid tropical growth to slow cold world metabolism, alien photosynthesis would adapt to each world's unique conditions while performing the same basic function, capturing light energy and converting it into chemical energy that powers ecosystems, potentially creating oxygen-rich atmospheres, modifying planetary chemistry in detectable ways, and revealing through their presence that life has discovered on distant worlds what it discovered on Earth. That starlight, properly harnessed through molecular machinery, shaped by billions of years of evolution, can power the chemical reactions that sustain living things, turning distant stars into energy sources for biology across the galaxy. How planets get their beautiful rings. When you think of planetary rings, Saturn immediately comes to mind, with its magnificent system of bright bands encircling the planet like a cosmic halo. But Saturn isn't alone in possessing rings. Jupiter, Uranus, and Neptune all have ring systems of their own. Though far less prominent, even some asteroids have been discovered with tiny rings circling them. These structures, some broad and bright, others narrow and faint, all share a common origin story rooted in gravity, orbital mechanics, and the sometimes violent history of the solar system. The basic ingredients for planetary rings are surprisingly simple. Countless small particles, ranging from dust grains smaller than smoke particles to chunks of rock and ice the size of houses, all orbiting a planet in a flat disk. What makes rings special isn't the individual particles but their collective behaviour, the way millions or billions of objects interact through gravity and collisions to create structures that can span hundreds of thousands of miles yet be only tens of meters thick. Rings form through several different mechanisms, and understanding these processes means understanding both creation and destruction, both gentle accumulation and catastrophic violence. The first and perhaps most dramatic way rings can form is through tidal disruption. Every planet generates a gravitational field that weakens with distance, and this creates tidal forces on any object orbiting nearby. If you imagine a moon orbiting close to a planet, the side of the moon facing the planet experiences stronger gravity than the side facing away. This difference in gravitational pull creates a stretching force that tries to pull the moon apart. There's a critical distance from any planet, called the Roche limit, inside which these tidal forces become stronger than the moon's own gravity holding it together. Cross this threshold, and the moon cannot remain intact. If a moon migrates inward through various processes, or if it formed inside this limit, it will be torn apart by tidal forces. The material doesn't disappear, it spreads out along the moon's orbital path, and over time, through collisions and gravitational interactions, it forms a flat ring around the planet. Picture this process in your mind. A small moon, perhaps captured from elsewhere in the solar system or formed in orbit around the planet, slowly spirals inward. Tidal interactions with the planet transfer energy and angular momentum, gradually changing the moon's orbit. As it crosses the Roche limit, cracks begin to form. Pieces break away, first small fragments, then larger chunks. The moon doesn't explode dramatically. it comes apart more gradually, like pulling apart a piece of bread. Each fragment continues orbiting the planet independently, and as they collide and break into smaller pieces, they spread into a disk of debris. This process may have created some of Saturn's rings, though the origin of Saturn's ring system remains one of the great puzzles in planetary science. The rings are remarkably bright and rich in water ice, suggesting they might be relatively young, perhaps only a few 100 million years old, rather than as ancient as the solar system itself. One theory suggests that a small icy moon, perhaps 200 miles across, wandered too close to Saturn and was torn apart by tidal forces. The shattered remains spread into the magnificent ring system we see today. Another way rings form is through collisions. Imagine two moons orbiting a planet on paths that eventually intersect, or an asteroid from elsewhere in the solar system crashing into a moon. The impact releases tremendous energy, shattering both objects and ejecting debris into space. Some of this material falls back onto the planet or escapes entirely, but much of it remains in orbit, gradually spreading into a ring. This collision scenario might explain some of the fainter, darker ring systems. Jupiter's rings, for instance, are composed of very small dust particles that appear reddish-brown, suggesting they might come from meteorite impacts onto small inner moons. When a meteorite strikes one of these tiny moons, it kicks up dust that then orbits Jupiter. This dust doesn't stay in the ring system forever. It gradually spirals inward due to interactions with Jupiter's magnetic field and atmospheric drag, but it's constantly replenished by new impacts. Rings can also form from a volcanic activity on moons, though this is a less common mechanism. Jupiter's moon, Io, is the most volcanically active body in the solar system, with eruptions constantly spewing material into space. Some of this material, particularly atoms of sodium and sulfur, forms extended clouds around Jupiter. While not a traditional ring of solid particles, these atomic clouds occupy ring-like regions and show that rings can have diverse origins and compositions. The shepherd moon mechanism plays a crucial role in maintaining and shaping rings once they form. Small moons orbiting just inside or outside a ring can gravitationally interact with ring particles, confining them to narrow bands. Imagine a ring particle in an orbit that would normally cause it to drift outward. As it approaches a shepherd moon, orbiting outside the ring, the moon's gravity tugs on it, altering its orbit and deflecting it back toward the ring. Similarly, a shepherd moon orbiting inside the ring can prevent particles from drifting inward. These gravitational interactions can create remarkably sharp ring edges and can even maintain gaps within ring systems. Saturn's moon Prometheus and Pandora act as shepherd moons for the narrow F ring, one of Saturn's outermost rings. The F ring is only a few 100 miles wide, but thousands of miles long, and without these shepherd moons, it would spread out and dissipate over time. The moon's gravity creates a delicate balance, continuously sculpting the ring into its narrow form. Resonances add another layer of complexity to ring formation and structure. When ring particles orbit at certain specific distances from a planet, their orbital period can be a simple fraction of a moon's orbital period, perhaps half as long, or a third or 2/5. At these resonant locations, the gravitational tugs from the moon occur at the same point in each orbit, adding up over time and creating powerful effects. Resonances can clear gaps in rings, sweeping particles out of certain orbital paths, or they can concentrate particles, creating narrow ringlets. The Cassini division, the prominent gap in Saturn's rings, visible even through small telescopes from Earth, exists primarily because of a resonance with the moon Mimas. Particles orbiting in the Cassini division have an orbital period exactly half that of Mimas. The repeated gravitational interactions at this resonance gradually push particles into different orbits, maintaining a gap nearly 3,000 miles wide. The particles within rings are not static. They're constantly colliding with each other, and these collisions shape the ring's structure and evolution. When two chunks of ice collide gently in Saturn's rings, they might stick together, growing larger. But more energetic collisions shatter particles into smaller pieces. There's a balance between these processes, and over time, rings develop a characteristic size distribution of particles, with many small particles and fewer large ones. These collisions also dissipate energy, causing the ring to flatten. Imagine particles orbiting at slightly different inclinations, some tilted a bit relative to others. When they collide, the vertical component of their motion is randomized and gradually damped out through repeated collisions. The result is that rings become extraordinarily thin relative to their width. Saturn's main rings span about 175,000 miles from inner edge to outer edge, yet they're typically only about 30 feet thick, a ratio that's thinner than a sheet of paper if scaled down. Temperature plays a role in ring dynamics as well. Ring particles are heated by sunlight and cooled by radiating infrared energy into space. The equilibrium temperature depends on the particle's size and composition. Larger particles have more thermal inertia and cool more slowly, while smaller particles respond quickly to changes in sunlight. These temperature variations affect how particles stick together when they collide, influencing whether the ring evolves toward larger clumps or maintains a population of smaller particles. The composition of ring particles varies widely between different planets and even within a single ring system. Saturn's rings are predominantly water ice, giving them their high reflectivity and bright appearance. The ice is remarkably pure, though there are trace amounts of rocky material and organic compounds that give some regions a slightly reddish or brownish tint. Uranus's rings, by contrast, are much darker, composed of material that reflects only a few % of the light that hits it. This dark material might be radiation-processed organic compounds, similar to the dark material found on some asteroids and comets. The age of ring systems is a matter of ongoing research and debate. Some rings might be primordial, dating back to the formation of the solar system itself 4.6 billion years ago. These would be rings made from material that was present in the disk of gas and dust from which the planets formed. Material that never coalesced into moons because it was inside the Roche limit. Other rings are clearly much younger, formed by relatively recent collisions or tidal disruptions. Saturn's rings, despite their prominence, might be surprisingly young. Several lines of evidence suggest they could be only a few 100 million years old. They're very bright and icy, lacking the darkening that would come from billions of years of meteorite bombardment. The amount of dust falling into Saturn's atmosphere from the rings suggests they're being depleted at a rate that couldn't be sustained over billions of years. If Saturn's rings are indeed young, it means we're living at a special time in the solar system's history, able to witness these magnificent structures during a brief window of their existence. Rings are not permanent features. They evolve over time, gradually spreading outward or inward, losing material to the planet's atmosphere or to moons, being disrupted by resonances or replenished by new collisions. Some ring systems might last for the lifetime of the solar system, while others might come and go over much shorter timescales. The rings we see today are snapshots in an ongoing process of creation, evolution, and eventual destruction. Even Earth might have had rings at some point in its distant past. Some researchers have suggested that a large impact that created debris in orbit could have temporarily given Earth a ring system that persisted for millions of years before the material either fell back to Earth or coalesced to form the Moon. While speculative, this idea reminds us that ring systems are dynamic features that can appear and disappear throughout a planet's history. The physics governing ring formation operates not just in our solar system, but around planets orbiting other stars as well. Exoplanets with large moon systems or recent collisions might sport ring systems, though detecting such rings at interstellar distances remains incredibly challenging with current technology. The same fundamental processes, tidal disruption, collisions, gravitational interactions, would operate universally, creating rings around any planet where conditions permit, adding layers of complexity and beauty to planetary systems throughout the galaxy. How life could exist on other planets. For billions of years, Earth has been teeming with life, from microscopic bacteria in the deepest ocean trenches to massive blue whales swimming through the seas, from fungi spreading through forest soil to humans building cities and reaching for the stars. But Earth is just one planet orbiting one star in a galaxy containing hundreds of billions of stars, in a universe containing hundreds of billions of galaxies. The question that haunts astronomers, biologists, and anyone who has ever looked up at the night sky is simple yet profound. Could life exist somewhere else? And if it does, what would it need to survive? The search for life beyond Earth begins with understanding what life actually requires. On Earth, all known life shares certain fundamental characteristics. Life requires liquid water as a solvent, a medium in which chemical reactions can occur. It needs a source of energy, whether from sunlight through photosynthesis or from chemical reactions in deep-sea hydrothermal vents. It requires raw materials, elements like carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, and sulfur that form the building blocks of proteins, DNA, and cell membranes. And it needs time, stable conditions lasting long enough for life to emerge from non-living chemistry and evolve into complex forms. Water stands out as the most critical requirement for life as we know it. Water is an exceptional solvent, capable of dissolving more substances than almost any other liquid. Its unique properties, remaining liquid across a wide temperature range, expanding when it freezes, having strong surface tension, make it ideal for biochemistry. Water molecules interact with each other and with other molecules in ways that facilitate the complex chemistry life requires. Every known organism on Earth, from the simplest bacterium to the most complex animal, depends on liquid water. This dependence on water defines what astronomers call the habitable zone around every star, the range of distances where a planet's surface temperature allows water to remain liquid. For our Sun, this zone extends roughly from just inside Earth's orbit to just beyond Mars. Venus orbits too close. Despite having had water in its distant past, the intense solar heating drove a runaway greenhouse effect that boiled away the oceans and left a hellish world with surface temperatures hot enough to melt lead. Mars orbits near the outer edge, cold enough that most water exists as ice, though liquid water might occasionally form in certain locations under special conditions. But the habitable zone looks different around different types of stars. Red dwarf stars, the most common stars in the galaxy, are much cooler and dimmer than our Sun. Their habitable zones lie much closer in. A planet might orbit only a few million miles from its star, yet still maintain temperatures suitable for liquid water. This close orbit creates challenges. The planet would likely become tidally locked, with one side permanently facing the star in eternal daylight, while the other freezes in perpetual darkness. Red dwarfs also tend to be more active, producing powerful flares that could strip away planetary atmospheres. Yet despite these challenges, red dwarfs are so numerous and long-lived, some will shine for trillions of years, that they represent countless opportunities for life to emerge. Larger, hotter stars have habitable zones farther out, but these stars burn through their fuel quickly, living only millions or billions of years rather than the tens of billions of years that red dwarfs enjoy. This might not provide enough time for complex life to evolve. On Earth, life emerged relatively quickly, within the first billion years, but complex multicellular life took nearly 3 billion years to appear. Intelligence and technology took even longer. A planet orbiting a massive, short-lived star might develop microbial life, but never progress beyond that before its star exhausts its fuel and dies. The atmosphere plays a crucial role in making a planet habitable. Earth's atmosphere provides pressure that keeps water liquid at the surface. Without atmospheric pressure, water would instantly boil away in the vacuum of space or freeze solid at low temperatures. The atmosphere also provides greenhouse warming. Without it, Earth's average temperature would be well below freezing despite being in the habitable zone. Too little greenhouse effect and a planet freezes. Too much and it becomes an inferno like Venus. The balance must be just right. Planetary mass matters significantly. A planet too small cannot hold onto an atmosphere. Its weak gravity allows atmospheric gases to escape into space. Mars demonstrates this problem. Mars once had a thicker atmosphere and liquid water flowing on its surface, carving the river valleys and lake beds that spacecraft have photographed. But Mars is only about 11% of Earth's mass, and over billions of years, its atmosphere gradually escaped. The loss accelerated because Mars lacks a strong magnetic field to shield the atmosphere from the solar wind, the stream of charged particles from the Sun that can strip away atmospheric gases from unprotected planets. A planet too large faces different problems. If a planet grows massive enough, it begins capturing hydrogen and helium directly from the protoplanetary disk during formation, becoming a gas giant like Jupiter rather than a rocky world with a solid surface. Some theories suggest that planets slightly more massive than Earth, called super-Earths, might actually be better for life than Earth itself. Their stronger gravity could hold thicker atmospheres, providing more greenhouse warming and allowing habitable zones to extend farther from their stars. Their larger size might also mean more volcanic activity, recycling nutrients and maintaining atmospheric composition over longer timescales. Plate tectonics, the process by which Earth's crust is broken into plates that move, collide, and subduct beneath each other, might be essential for long-term habitability. Plate tectonics regulates Earth's climate through the carbon cycle. When carbon dioxide accumulates in the atmosphere, chemical weathering of rocks gradually removes it, and subduction carries carbonate minerals deep into the mantle, where heat releases the carbon dioxide back through volcanic eruptions. This cycle acts as a thermostat, preventing runaway greenhouse or icehouse conditions. Without plate tectonics, a planet might lose this regulatory mechanism, making long-term habitability more difficult. But life is remarkably adaptable, and the conditions necessary for life might be far more flexible than our Earth-based experience suggests. On Earth, extremophiles, organisms that thrive in extreme environments, have shattered assumptions about where life can exist. Bacteria live in boiling hot springs at temperatures exceeding 200 degrees Fahrenheit. Microorganisms thrive in the frigid lakes beneath the Antarctic ice. Life exists in hypersaline lakes many times saltier than the ocean, in acidic pools with pH levels that would dissolve metal, and in alkaline lakes caustic enough to burn skin. These extremophiles prove that life can adapt to conditions that would seem utterly hostile. Deep-sea hydrothermal vents host entire ecosystems based not on sunlight, but on chemical energy. Bacteria oxidize hydrogen sulfide and other chemicals spewing from the vents, and entire food chains build upon these chemosynthetic microbes. This discovery revolutionized thinking about where life could exist. A planet doesn't need sunlight reaching its surface to support life. Chemical energy from geological processes suffices. This realization expanded the search for life to include places like Jupiter's moon Europa and Saturn's moon Enceladus, which have subsurface oceans kept liquid by tidal heating. With no sunlight penetrating miles of surface ice, life might not even require a planet's surface. Europa and Enceladus demonstrate that subsurface oceans beneath ice shells can persist for billions of years. These hidden oceans might contain hydrothermal vents similar to those on Earth's ocean floor, providing chemical energy and raw materials for life. Enceladus actively vents water vapor, organic molecules, and salts into space through cracks in its ice, material that spacecraft have flown through and analyzed. The presence of organic molecules and evidence for hydrothermal activity suggests that Enceladus has at least some of the ingredients necessary for life. Titan, Saturn's largest moon, presents an entirely different possibility. Titan is the only moon in the solar system with a thick atmosphere, and it has lakes and rivers on its surface, but they're filled with liquid methane and ethane rather than water. The surface temperature, at about -300 degrees Fahrenheit, is far too cold for liquid water, but some scientists speculate that life might use liquid methane as a solvent instead of water, with biochemistry based on different chemical reactions more suited to cryogenic temperatures. Such life would be utterly alien, built on completely different principles than Earth's biology, but the basic requirements, a liquid solvent, chemical reactions, energy sources, might still allow life to emerge. The possibility of silicon-based life has long fascinated scientists and science fiction writers. Silicon sits directly below carbon in the periodic table and shares many chemical properties. Both form 4 chemical bonds, allowing them to create complex molecules. But silicon-based molecules are generally less stable and less diverse than carbon-based ones, particularly in the presence of water, which tends to break down silicon compounds. In environments without water, perhaps on a world with liquid hydrocarbons or even molten sulfur, silicon-based biochemistry might be possible, though it would function very differently from life on Earth. Life could potentially use different genetic molecules than DNA and RNA. These molecules store and transmit genetic information using a sugar phosphate backbone with nitrogen-based molecules attached. But chemists have synthesized alternatives called XNAS, xenonucleic acids, that use different sugars or even different backbone structures entirely. These artificial genetic molecules can store information and undergo evolution through selection, suggesting that life elsewhere might have invented entirely different solutions to the problem of heredity. Timescales matter enormously for life's emergence and evolution. On Earth, simple life appeared relatively quickly after conditions became favourable, perhaps within a few 100 million years of Earth's formation. This suggests that the transition from non-living chemistry to living organisms might not require unusual conditions or extraordinary luck. But the transition from simple microbes to complex multicellular organisms took vastly longer, roughly 3 billion years. The development of intelligence and technology required nearly all of Earth's history. A planet might easily develop microbial life, but remain stuck at that level indefinitely if conditions don't favour the evolution of complexity. Some planets might develop life, but lose it. Mars almost certainly had more favourable conditions for life billions of years ago when it was warmer and wetter. If life emerged during that time, it might have gone extinct when Mars lost most of its atmosphere and water, or it might persist in subsurface refuges where liquid water still exists in aquifers deep underground. Venus might have had habitable surface conditions early in its history before the runaway greenhouse effect transformed it into the hellscape it is today. Any life that emerged would have been sterilized, leaving no trace. Rogue planets, worlds ejected from their planetary systems to wander interstellar space, might still harbor life, despite receiving no light from any star. If a rogue planet is massive enough to retain a thick atmosphere, and if it has enough radioactive elements in its interior to provide heat, it could maintain liquid water beneath an ice shell indefinitely. Such planets would be invisible to most detection methods, dark worlds drifting through the galaxy, potentially harboring biospheres in their hidden oceans. Binary star systems, where 2 stars orbit each other, comprise about half of all stellar systems. Planets in these systems could orbit both stars at a large distance, experiencing light from two suns, or orbit one star closely while the other remains distant. Either configuration could potentially support habitable planets, though the complex gravitational dynamics make stable orbits more difficult to achieve and maintain over billions of years. The discovery of thousands of exoplanets has revealed that planetary systems come in astonishing variety. Hot Jupiters orbit closer to their stars than Mercury orbits our Sun. Super-Earths, a planet type absent from our solar system, appear to be common. Some systems pack multiple planets into orbits closer than Mercury's. This diversity suggests that habitable worlds might exist in configurations we haven't imagined, orbiting in stable zones within systems that look nothing like our own. Life could exist on other planets through countless permutations of chemistry, energy sources, solvents, temperatures, and planetary conditions. It might be carbon-based like us, or built from silicon or other elements. It might use water or methane or ammonia or substances we haven't considered. It might photosynthesize under a red sun or derive energy from chemical reactions in lightless seas beneath miles of ice. The universe is vast, ancient, and filled with planets and the basic ingredients for life. Elements forged in stars, energy from stellar radiation or geological processes, and the simple passage of time exist everywhere. Whether life has taken advantage of these opportunities elsewhere remains the greatest unanswered question in science, but the conditions that could allow it exist on countless worlds scattered throughout the cosmos. How galaxies live and die. Galaxies are not eternal, unchanging structures frozen in the void. They are dynamic systems that evolve over billions of years, passing through distinct phases from birth to maturity to eventual decline. Each galaxy follows a life story shaped by gravity, star formation, gas flows, and violent interactions with other galaxies, ultimately transforming from active star-forming systems into quiet collections of aging stars, or sometimes meeting more dramatic fates in collisions that tear them apart and rebuild them into something new. The birth of a galaxy begins in the early universe, just a few 100 million years after the Big Bang. At this time, the cosmos was filled with vast clouds of hydrogen and helium, distributed nearly uniformly, but with tiny variations in density imprinted during the first moments after the Big Bang. Dark matter, invisible but gravitationally powerful, began to collapse first into clumps and filaments, creating gravitational wells that attracted normal matter. Gas flowed along these dark matter filaments, accumulating in regions where the gravitational pull was strongest. These early accumulations of gas were turbulent, chaotic places. The gas was cold, collapsing under its own gravity into smaller and smaller clumps. Within these collapsing clouds, the first stars ignited, massive and brilliant, burning through their nuclear fuel in just a few million years before exploding as supernova. These explosions enriched the surrounding gas with heavier elements, carbon, oxygen, iron, and others, that hadn't existed in the primordial universe. More stars formed from this enriched gas, creating a positive feedback cycle where star formation bred more star formation. A young galaxy is a vigorous place, forming stars at prodigious rates. Gas continues to fall into the galaxy from the surrounding cosmic web, providing fresh fuel for star formation. These early galaxies are often irregular in shape, lacking the elegant spiral arms or smooth elliptical forms of mature galaxies. They're clumpy and asymmetric, filled with giant regions of intense star formation where thousands of stars are being born simultaneously. The massive stars in these regions produce copious ultraviolet radiation that ionizes the surrounding gas, creating glowing nebulae visible across vast distances. As a galaxy matures, it begins to develop structure. If it has significant angular momentum, inherited from the rotation of the gas cloud from which it formed, it settles into a rotating disk. Within this disk, Density waves organize stars and gas into spiral arms, elegant patterns that rotate around the galactic center. Stars form preferentially in these spiral arms, where gas is compressed by the passing density wave. The galaxy takes on the classic spiral form we see in galaxies like our own Milky Way or the nearby Andromeda galaxy. The disk of a spiral galaxy contains young hot blue stars mixed with older, cooler yellow and red stars. Gas lanes trace the spiral arms, visible as dark patches where dust blocks light from stars behind. At the center lies the bulge, a roughly spherical concentration of older stars, and at the very heart of the bulge lurks a supermassive black hole, containing millions to billions of times the mass of the Sun. This black hole profoundly influences the galaxy's evolution, though in ways that are still not completely understood. Star formation in a mature galaxy is a self-regulating process. Gas collapses to form stars, but the stars themselves affect the gas around them. Massive stars produce powerful winds that push gas away. Supernova explosions inject tremendous energy into the interstellar medium, heating gas and driving it outward in expanding bubbles and shells. This feedback can temporarily suppress star formation in regions around young star clusters, giving the galaxy a breathing, pulsating quality where star formation surges and ebbs over millions of years. The supermassive black hole at a galaxy's center can dramatically affect its evolution. When gas falls toward the black hole, it forms an accretion disk, heating to millions of degrees and emitting intense radiation across the electromagnetic spectrum. This active galactic nucleus can outshine all the stars in the galaxy combined. The energy released can drive powerful winds and jets that blow gas out of the galaxy entirely, removing the raw material needed for star formation. Many galaxies go through active phases when their central black holes are feeding vigorously, then quiet phases when little material is falling inward and the black hole lies dormant. Galaxies don't evolve in isolation. They're part of a cosmic web, connected by filaments of dark matter and gas to other galaxies nearby. Smaller galaxies fall into larger ones, adding their stars and gas to the growing giant. The Milky Way has consumed dozens of smaller satellite galaxies over its history, and it will consume more in the future. Each merger adds complexity to the galaxy's structure, sometimes triggering bursts of star formation as gas clouds collide and compress, sometimes disrupting the orderly rotation of the disk and scattering stars into less organized orbits. Major mergers, when two galaxies of comparable size collide, are transformative events. The collision unfolds over hundreds of millions of years as the galaxy's gravitational fields interact. Stars almost never collide directly. The distances between stars are so vast that even in a galactic collision, stellar collisions are extraordinarily rare. But the gravitational interactions between the passing galaxies create tidal forces that stretch and distort each galaxy's structure. Long tidal tails of stars and gas stream away from the collision site, some eventually falling back into the merged system, others dispersed into intergalactic space. The gas in colliding galaxies does collide, directly and violently. Giant molecular clouds slam together at speeds of hundreds of kilometers per second, creating shockwaves that compress the gas and trigger intense bursts of star formation. These starburst galaxies can form stars at rates hundreds of times higher than normal galaxies, converting much of their gas into stars within just tens of millions of years. The newly formed massive stars live brief lives and explode as supernovae, creating a cascade of feedback that heats the remaining gas and can drive much of it out of the galaxy entirely. The end result of a major merger is typically an elliptical galaxy. The orderly rotation of the spiral disks is destroyed by the chaotic gravitational interactions of the merger. Stars end up on random orbits, creating a roughly spherical or elliptical distribution rather than a flat disk. Elliptical galaxies contain mostly old stars, appearing yellowish or reddish because they lack the young blue stars that make spiral galaxies appear white or blue. They have little gas left for star formation, having either converted most of their gas into stars during the merger or expelled it through feedback from star formation and active galactic nuclei. Elliptical galaxies represent a kind of middle age or retirement for galaxies. They're massive, sometimes containing trillions of stars, but they're largely quiescent, forming few new stars. The stars within them are aging, slowly converting hydrogen to helium in their cores, gradually dimming as they exhaust their fuel. Over hundreds of billions of years, these stars will die one by one. Low-mass stars will swell into red giants, then shed their outer layers as planetary nebulae, leaving behind white dwarf remnants. Higher-mass stars will explode as supernova, leaving neutron stars, or black holes. As stars die, they return some of their material to the interstellar medium, but much of their mass remains locked in stellar remnants. The galaxy's gas supply dwindles, and with no new gas falling in from outside, star formation gradually ceases. The galaxy grows dimmer as its most luminous stars die and are not replaced. Eventually, in the far future, such a galaxy would consist primarily of white dwarfs, neutron stars, and black holes, the dead remnants of stars that once shone brightly. Some galaxies meet more dramatic ends. In dense galaxy clusters, high-speed collisions and gravitational interactions can tear galaxies apart. Ram pressure stripping occurs when a galaxy moves through the hot intracluster gas that fills the space between galaxies in a cluster. This hot gas, though tenuous, exerts pressure on the cold gas in the moving galaxy, stripping it away like wind pulling leaves from a tree. The galaxy is left with no gas for star formation, rapidly aging as its existing stars evolve and die without being replaced. Galaxies can also be tidally disrupted by close passes to much more massive galaxies. The tidal forces, the difference in gravitational pull between the near and far sides of the smaller galaxy, can be strong enough to overcome the galaxy's self-gravity, pulling it apart into streams of stars that wrap around the larger galaxy. The Milky Way is currently in the process of tidally disrupting the Sagittarius dwarf elliptical galaxy, a small galaxy that passed too close and is now being stretched into a stream of stars encircling our galaxy. In the very long term, over timescales of trillions of years, galaxies face a dark future. The expansion of the universe, driven by dark energy, is accelerating. Galaxy clusters will remain gravitationally bound, but individual clusters will become increasingly isolated from each other as the space between them grows. Within each cluster, galaxies will gradually merge, forming ever larger elliptical galaxies. Eventually, each cluster will merge into a single giant elliptical galaxy containing all the matter that was once in dozens or hundreds of separate galaxies. Even these ultimate galaxies will fade. Star formation will cease entirely as all available gas is either converted into stars or expelled from galaxies. The remaining stars will age and die. White dwarfs will cool, becoming black dwarfs, cold, dark stellar remnants that no longer emit visible light. Neutron stars will radiate away their heat over inconceivable timescales. Black holes will slowly evaporate through Hawking radiation, though this process takes vastly longer than the current age of the universe. 10 to the power of 10, 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 to the power of 10 to 100th power years for a solar mass black hole, far longer for the supermassive black holes at galaxy centers. The life cycle of galaxies is intimately connected to the larger evolution of the universe itself. In the early universe, galaxies formed rapidly and evolved quickly, building up their stellar populations and establishing their structures. In the current era, galaxies continue to form stars but more sedately, and many have settled into mature configurations. In the far future, galaxy formation will cease as the expanding universe spreads matter too thinly for new gravitational collapses to occur. The galaxies that exist will gradually fade as their stars die and are not replaced. But this distant future is trillions of years away. For now, and for the foreseeable future, galaxies remain vibrant systems. Star formation continues, though at lower rates than in the past. Galaxies merge and interact, transforming themselves in violent collisions that reshape their structures. New observations reveal galaxies at ever greater distances, showing us how they looked when the universe was young, allowing us to piece together the story of how galaxies live and die, how they transform over cosmic time, and how the universe itself evolves through the changes that galaxies undergo as they pass through their long but finite lifespans. How life could survive on rogue planets. Most planets orbit stars, bathed in starlight that provides warmth and energy for any life that might evolve. But scattered throughout the galaxy are worlds that wander alone through the darkness of interstellar space. Rogue planets, ejected from their birth solar systems through gravitational interactions, or perhaps forming in isolation, drifting for billions of years without a sun to orbit. These orphaned worlds seem like the least hospitable places imaginable for life. Cut off from starlight, they receive no external heat source, no energy for photosynthesis, no warming to maintain liquid water on their surfaces. Yet despite these apparently insurmountable obstacles, life might still find ways to survive on rogue planets, drawing on internal heat sources, subsurface environments, and the remarkable adaptability that evolution has demonstrated countless times on Earth when organisms colonize seemingly impossible habitats. The key to habitability on rogue planets is internal heat. Unlike stars, which generate heat through nuclear fusion, rogue planets must rely on residual heat from formation and ongoing heat from radioactive decay of elements in their interiors. When planets form, the process of accretion, countless collisions between smaller bodies that gradually build up the planet, converts kinetic energy into heat. Additionally, gravitational compression, as material piles up, releases energy that heats the planet's interior. A newly formed planet is molten or partially molten, taking millions to billions of years to cool. This primordial heat, combined with heat from radioactive decay of uranium, thorium, potassium, and other radioactive isotopes in the planet's rocks, keeps planetary interiors warm for billions of years. Earth itself generates about 47 terawatts of internal heat, roughly equal to 10,000 large power plants operating continuously. Most of this heat comes from radioactive decay, with some contribution from residual primordial heat and from crystallization of Earth's molten iron core. This internal heat drives plate tectonics, powers volcanic activity, and maintains Earth's magnetic field. A rogue planet of similar size and composition would generate similar amounts of internal heat, regardless of whether it orbits a star or drifts through interstellar space. The challenge is keeping that heat trapped. Without an atmosphere, heat would radiate directly into space, and the planet's surface would quickly reach temperatures only a few degrees above absolute zero, the background temperature of the universe, about minus 270 degrees Celsius. But a substantial atmosphere could act as insulation, trapping heat through the greenhouse effect and maintaining warmer temperatures at the surface or in the lower atmosphere, even without any external heat source. A rogue planet with a thick hydrogen atmosphere could potentially maintain surface temperatures warm enough for liquid water through atmospheric pressure and greenhouse warming alone. Hydrogen is the lightest and most abundant element in the universe, and large planets can capture and retain massive hydrogen envelopes during formation. The greenhouse effect from a thick hydrogen atmosphere, combined with internal heat radiating from below, could create a temperature profile that allows liquid water to exist at the surface or at some depth within the atmosphere, where pressure and temperature are both suitable. Computer models suggest that a rogue planet several times Earth's mass, with a hydrogen atmosphere perhaps 100 times more massive than Earth's atmosphere, could maintain surface temperatures above the freezing point of water for billions of years, powered only by internal heat. Such a planet would be entirely dark at the surface, no day or night, just eternal darkness. But it would be warm enough for liquid water, and where there's liquid water and a source of energy, life becomes possible. Life on such a world could not depend on photosynthesis, but that's not necessarily a problem. On Earth, entire ecosystems exist in permanent darkness, sustained by chemosynthetic bacteria that extract energy from chemical reactions rather than sunlight. Deep-sea hydrothermal vents host thriving communities where bacteria oxidize hydrogen, sulfide, methane, or hydrogen, using the chemical energy to build organic molecules from carbon dioxide. These chemosynthetic bacteria form the base of food chains that support tube worms, clams, fish, and crustaceans, all living in absolute darkness, kilometers beneath the ocean surface. A rogue planet with liquid water oceans, maintained by internal heat and atmospheric greenhouse warming, could develop similar chemosynthetic ecosystems. Volcanic activity would vent gases like hydrogen, hydrogen sulfide, methane, and carbon dioxide into the water and atmosphere. Bacteria could evolve to extract energy from these chemicals, building organic molecules that could support more complex organisms. The entire biosphere would operate on chemical energy from the planet's interior rather than solar energy, making the planet's life forms independent of any star. Subsurface oceans represent an even more plausible habitat for life on rogue planets. Many worlds in our solar system likely have liquid water oceans beneath ice shells. Europa, Enceladus, possibly Titan, Ganymede, Callisto, Pluto, and other bodies. These oceans are kept liquid by tidal heating from their parent planets, or by internal radioactive heating. A rogue planet with sufficient internal heat and a thick ice shell could maintain a subsurface ocean indefinitely, with the ice providing insulation that prevents the ocean from freezing while protecting it from the harsh radiation and extreme cold of interstellar space. The ice shell on a rogue planet might be very thick, perhaps tens or hundreds of kilometers, creating an insulating layer that traps internal heat far more effectively than any atmosphere. The ocean beneath this ice would be completely dark, protected from the radiation that fills interstellar space, and stable for billions of years. Temperature would be maintained by heat flowing from the rocky mantle below. Hydrothermal vents on the ocean floor would provide chemicals and energy for chemosynthetic life. Such an ocean might be an ideal habitat, more stable than surface oceans on planets orbiting stars where stellar evolution, asteroid impacts, and climate variations create periodic catastrophes. Life in a subsurface ocean on a rogue planet would never know stars exist. The entire biosphere would be confined to the dark ocean, with the ice ceiling above and rocky floor below defining the limits of the habitable universe. Evolution would never produce eyes sensitive to visible light, because no visible light exists. Organisms might instead evolve chemical sensing, pressure sensing, electroreception, or other non-visual senses. Intelligence, if it evolved, would develop without ever seeing stars, planets, or anything beyond the ocean's boundaries. Such a civilization might not even realize that a larger universe exists beyond their world, having no way to detect or observe the space around them through kilometers of ice. Geothermal pockets could create localized habitable zones even on rogue planets without global oceans. Volcanic activity or concentrations of radioactive elements could heat specific regions, melting ice to create underground lakes or pockets of liquid water embedded in ice. These isolated water bodies might be small, perhaps only a few kilometers across, but they could persist for millions of years, long enough for life to evolve and diversify within each pocket. Different pockets might develop different ecosystems in isolation from each other, creating multiple independent evolutionary experiments on a single rogue world. Atmosphere composition would profoundly affect habitability. A rogue planet that retained or captured a hydrogen-helium atmosphere during formation could use that atmosphere's greenhouse effect to maintain warmth. Carbon dioxide, methane, and ammonia are all more effective greenhouse gases than hydrogen and would enhance warming at much lower atmospheric masses. A rogue planet with a thick carbon dioxide atmosphere and substantial internal heat might maintain temperatures warm enough for liquid water with a much thinner atmosphere than a hydrogen-dominated world would need. The size of the rogue planet matters significantly. Larger planets generate more internal heat from radioactive decay simply because they contain more radioactive material. Larger planets can also hold thicker atmospheres through stronger gravity and lose heat more slowly because their surface area to volume ratio is smaller. Heat escapes through the surface, but heat is generated throughout the volume, so larger planets stay warm longer. A rogue super-Earth several times, Earth's mass might remain habitable for far longer than an Earth-mass rogue planet, potentially maintaining surface or subsurface liquid water for for tens of billions of years or more. Very small rogue planets, Mars-sized or smaller, would struggle to maintain habitability. They would cool quickly, losing internal heat within a few billion years. Their weak gravity would allow atmospheric escape, making it difficult to maintain the thick atmospheres needed for greenhouse warming. However, even small rogue worlds might maintain subsurface liquid water in deep aquifers or isolated pockets warmed by concentrations of radioactive elements or by residual heat from formation for some period after being ejected from their parent system. The abundance of rogue planets remains uncertain, but some estimates suggest they might outnumber stars. If planets are commonly ejected during the chaotic early phases of planetary system formation, the galaxy might contain billions or even trillions of rogue planets drifting through interstellar space. Most would be cold, dark, and apparently lifeless at their surfaces, but some fraction might maintain subsurface oceans or possess the right combination of size, composition, and atmosphere to support life in hidden biospheres, beneath ice or in dark surface oceans sustained by nothing more than the planet's internal warmth. Detecting life on rogue planets would be extraordinarily challenging. These worlds emit no reflected starlight, making them nearly impossible to detect through traditional astronomical methods. They can only be detected through gravitational microlensing. When a rogue planet passes in front of a distant star from Earth's perspective, its gravity briefly magnifies the star's light, or through direct detection of their infrared emission, the faint heat radiating from their surfaces. Neither method provides information about atmospheres, surface conditions, or potential habitability, let alone biosignatures. Future infrared telescopes might be able to detect the warmest rogue planets and potentially characterize their atmospheres if those atmospheres are thick enough to produce detectable spectral features. Finding methane, carbon dioxide, or other gases in unexpected ratios might hint at biological activity, though distinguishing biological from geological sources would be nearly impossible without additional information. Direct exploration by spacecraft seems impractical, given the vast distances between stars and the difficulty of even locating rogue planets, let alone traveling to them. The evolutionary trajectory of life on rogue planets might differ fundamentally from life on planets orbiting stars. Without the regular day-night cycle that drives circadian rhythms on Earth, organisms would have no reason to evolve timekeeping mechanisms tied to planetary rotation. Without seasons caused by axial tilt and orbital motion, there would be no seasonal cycles, no annual rhythms. Life would exist in an eternal, unchanging environment, at least on timescales shorter than geological epochs, potentially leading to very different evolutionary pressures than life on Earth experiences. The isolation of rogue planets creates another interesting possibility. These worlds might serve as interstellar arcs, carrying life between star systems. If a planet with a biosphere is ejected from its home system, life on that planet doesn't necessarily die. If the planet maintains subsurface oceans, through internal heating, life in those oceans could survive indefinitely, potentially for billions of years, as the planet drifts through the galaxy. Eventually, such a planet might be captured by another star system, or it might pass close to a star that warms the planet temporarily, allowing surface life to revive if it was dormant. This mechanism, planets carrying life between star systems, represents a form of panspermia that could spread life throughout the galaxy. How life could survive on rogue planets demonstrates the resilience and adaptability of biology when provided with even minimal requirements. Liquid water, chemical energy, raw materials, and time. A rogue planet cut off from all starlight, drifting through the darkness of interstellar space for billions of years, seems like an impossible place for life. Yet internal heat and thick atmospheres, or ice shells, could create hidden habitats where chemosynthetic ecosystems thrive in eternal darkness, where evolution operates unconstrained by day-night or seasonal cycles, where intelligent beings might arise never knowing that stars exist, and where life demonstrates its ultimate independence from sunlight, proving that biology requires not a sun to orbit, but merely the right chemical conditions and energy sources, expanding the definition of habitable environments to include not just planets in stellar habitable zones, but potentially countless dark worlds adrift in the spaces between the stars, each one a potential harbour for life in the vast ocean of the galaxy. How the moon pulls on Earth's oceans. Twice each day, the ocean rises up beaches and coastlines around the world, then retreats back toward the sea. This rhythmic rise and fall of the tides has shaped human civilization for thousands of years, governing when ships could enter harbours, when fishermen could gather shellfish from tidal pools, and when coastal communities needed to prepare for high water. The connection between these tides and the moon was recognised in ancient times, but understanding exactly how the moon creates tides requires thinking carefully about gravity, how it varies with distance, and how Earth's ocean responds to forces that stretch and squeeze it in complex ways. The fundamental cause of tides is gravity, but not gravity in the simple sense of the moon pulling water toward itself. If that were the entire story, we would see one bulge of water on the side of Earth facing the moon, and that would be the end of it. Instead, we observe two tidal bulges, one on the side facing the moon and another on the opposite side of Earth. This puzzling fact confused natural philosophers for centuries, until Isaac Newton, in his Principia Mathematica, published in 1687, provided the correct explanation using his law of universal gravitation and his laws of motion. The key insight is that the moon's gravity pulls on every part of Earth, but it pulls with different strengths depending on distance. The side of Earth closest to the moon experiences stronger gravitational attraction than Earth's centre, which in turn experiences stronger attraction than the far side. This difference in gravitational force across Earth's diameter creates what are called tidal forces, forces that try to stretch Earth along the line, connecting it to the moon, while simultaneously squeezing it perpendicular to that line. Imagine Earth's structure for a moment. The solid rock of Earth's crust and mantle resists deformation quite strongly. While tidal forces do deform the solid Earth slightly, raising and lowering the ground by about a foot, the effect is not dramatic because rock is stiff and strong. The oceans, however, are fluid. They can flow freely in response to forces, and they respond readily to the tidal forces that the solid Earth largely resists. Consider a point on Earth's surface directly beneath the moon. The water at this location is about 4,000 miles closer to the moon than Earth's centre. The moon's gravitational pull weakens with distance according to an inverse square law. Double the distance and the force becomes 1/4 as strong. This means the ocean on the near side experiences a gravitational pull toward the moon that's about 7% stronger than the pull experienced by Earth's centre. This differential force pulls the ocean away from Earth's centre, creating a bulge of water on the moon-facing side. Now consider the opposite side of Earth, the point farthest from the moon. Here the ocean is about 4,000 miles farther from the moon than Earth's centre. The gravitational pull from the moon at this location is about 7% weaker than at Earth's centre. Earth's centre is being pulled toward the moon more strongly than the water on the far side, effectively pulling Earth away from the water and leaving the water behind. The result is another bulge on the side opposite the moon. This creates the characteristic two-bulge pattern. If you could freeze time and look at Earth from space, you would see the oceans slightly elongated along the Earth-Moon line, with high water on both the near and far sides and low water at the points 90 degrees away from the moon. As Earth rotates beneath these bulges, any given point on Earth's surface passes through two high tides and two low tides each day. though not exactly every 12 hours, because the moon is also moving in its orbit, shifting the position of the bulges over time. The height of these tidal bulges would be quite modest if they responded only to the moon's gravitational pull, perhaps a foot or two in the open ocean. But the actual tides we observe at coastlines can be dozens of feet high. This amplification occurs because of the way ocean basins are shaped and because of resonance effects as water sloshes back and forth in confined spaces. The Bay of Fundy in Canada experiences the world's highest tides, sometimes exceeding 50 feet, because the bay's shape and size create a natural resonance that amplifies the tidal forcing from the moon and sun. The sun also creates tides on Earth, though they're smaller than lunar tides despite the sun's vastly greater mass. The reason is distance. The sun is about 400 times farther from Earth than the moon, and tidal forces depend not just on mass, but on how much the gravitational pull varies across Earth's diameter. The sun's great distance means its gravitational pull varies less across Earth than the moon's does, making solar tides about 46% as strong as lunar tides, a ratio that Pierre-Simon Laplace calculated in detail in his comprehensive work on celestial mechanics in the late 1700s. The interaction between solar and lunar tides creates the familiar spring and neap tide cycle. When the moon and sun align, either on the same side of Earth during a new moon or on opposite sides during a full moon, their tidal effects add together, creating spring tides with especially high tides and especially low tides. The name has nothing to do with the season, but comes from the idea that the tides spring forth. When the moon and sun are at right angles as seen from Earth during first and third quarter moons, their tidal effects partially cancel, creating neap tides with smaller tidal ranges. This 2-week cycle of spring and neap tides is predictable and was well understood by ancient mariners, though they lacked Newton's gravitational explanation for why it occurred. The timing of tides is not as simple as one might expect. If you observe the tides at any coastal location, you'll notice that high tide doesn't occur exactly when the moon is overhead or exactly when it's on the opposite side of Earth. There's typically a delay of several hours called the tidal lag. This occurs because the ocean cannot respond instantaneously to the changing tidal forces. Water has inertia, it takes time to accelerate and decelerate, and friction between the moving water and the ocean floor dissipates energy, creating phase lags between the tidal forces and the ocean's response. These friction effects have profound long-term consequences. As tidal bulges try to follow the moon, but are dragged forward slightly by Earth's rotation, they create a gravitational pull on the moon that's not perfectly aligned with the Earth-Moon line. This misaligned pull acts to accelerate the moon in its orbit, gradually increasing its orbital energy and causing it to move away from Earth. Precise laser ranging measurements using reflectors left on the moon by Apollo astronauts have confirmed that the moon is receding from Earth at about 1.5 inches per year. This recession cannot continue indefinitely at the current rate. As the moon moves farther away, tidal effects weaken, slowing the recession. But over the 4.5 billion years since the moon formed, likely from debris created when a Mars-sized object collided with the young Earth, the moon has moved substantially farther from Earth. Early in Earth's history, when the moon was much closer, perhaps only 15,000 miles away compared to today's 240,000 miles, tidal forces were enormously stronger. Tides might have been hundreds of feet high, and the moon would have appeared many times larger in the sky, looming over the horizon like an enormous sphere dominating the heavens. The energy dissipated by tidal friction doesn't just affect the moon's orbit, it also affects Earth's rotation. The gravitational drag from the tidal bulges acts to slow Earth's rotation gradually. Each century, Earth's day lengthens by about 1.7 milliseconds. This seems negligible, but over geological time, it accumulates. Fossil evidence from ancient corals, which show daily growth bands much like tree rings, indicates that 400 million years ago, Earth's day was only about 22 hours long, and a year contained about 400 days. The moon was closer, Earth rotated faster, and tides were stronger. This tidal interaction between Earth and the moon is an example of tidal locking in progress. The moon is already tidally locked to Earth, always showing the same face toward Earth because tidal forces from Earth have synchronized the moon's rotation period with its orbital period. Earth is gradually becoming tidally locked to the moon as well, though this process will take tens of billions of years to complete, longer than the remaining lifetime of the Sun. If it could be completed eventually, Earth would always show the same face to the moon, and the moon would hang stationary in the sky over one hemisphere, never visible from the other. Other bodies in the solar system experience even more extreme tidal effects. Jupiter's moon, Io, the most volcanically active body in the solar system, is heated internally by tidal flexing. As Io orbits Jupiter in an elliptical path, the tidal forces it experiences vary in strength, squeezing and stretching the moon's interior. This constant kneading generates tremendous heat through friction, keeping Io's interior molten and driving its spectacular volcanic eruptions. This process, predicted by Stanton Peele and colleagues just before the Voyager spacecraft discovered Io's volcanism in 1979, is called tidal heating. Saturn's moon Enceladus experiences similar tidal heating, though less extreme than Io. The heat from tidal flexing keeps a subsurface ocean liquid beneath Enceladus's icy crust, and tidal stresses crack the ice at the South Pole, allowing geysers of water to erupt into space. Europa, another moon of Jupiter, likely has its subsurface ocean maintained by tidal heating as well, making it one of the most promising places to search for life beyond Earth. Tidal forces can also be destructive. Every large body creates a tidal limit, called the Roche limit, after Edouard Roche, who calculated it in 1848, inside which tidal forces exceed the self-gravity holding a satellite together. A moon that wanders inside the Roche limit will be torn apart by tidal forces, pulled into fragments that spread into a ring around the planet. Saturn's magnificent ring system may have originated this way, from a moon that either formed inside the Roche limit or migrated inward and was disrupted. Tidal forces operate throughout the universe. Binary stars experience tides that can transfer mass from one star to its companion. Black holes create tidal forces so extreme that they can tear apart stars that pass too close, creating spectacular tidal disruption events. Galaxies passing near each other experience tidal forces that stretch them into long streams of stars, creating the tidal tails visible in many interacting galaxies. The same physics that causes ocean tides on Earth, the differential pull of gravity across an extended object, operates on scales from moons and planets to stars and galaxies. The tides we observe at the beach are the local manifestation of a cosmic dance between Earth and Moon, a gravitational interaction that has been occurring since the Moon formed and will continue for billions of years into the future. Every incoming wave, every tide pool exposed at low tide, every ship waiting for high water to enter harbour is part of this larger story of how gravity shapes the motion of celestial bodies and how the Moon, our constant companion in the night sky, continues to sculpt the behaviour of Earth's oceans through the subtle but inexorable pull of tidal forces.